He was never supposed to come back. Not after everything that happened. A retired Marine with weary eyes and a dog no one wanted anymore, both broken in their own ways. The man's silence was heavy, the dog's tremors constant. Once, they had been inseparable. One team. One heartbeat. But divorce had split them apart. A perfect lawn had replaced the battlefield, and a quiet suburb had become a kind of prison. People forgot that even dogs could shatter. But one man hadn't forgotten. And what he did next wasn't vengeance. It was redemption. What you're about to witness isn't just a rescue. It's a resurrection. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe God's love can heal through scars and paws alike, then hit subscribe, because this story might just change how you see loyalty forever. The air in Sierra Brook carried the faint scent of dry pine and memory. It was early October, and the Montana sky hung low beneath a soft curtain of haze, the kind that turned the golden fields into muted fire under the gray light. A wooden sign stood crooked at the edge of town, paint peeling, words fading. Welcome to Sierra Brook, founded 1854. As Logan Hartley's old pickup rumbled down the narrow road, winding between bales of hay and idle tractors, the weight of the years pressed down on him harder than any combat pack he'd ever worn. Logan was 39. Broad-shouldered. His movements carried the quiet precision of a man who had learned discipline the hard way. His black jacket was dusted with road grit, and a thin scar traced his jawline, not from a mission, but from a bar fight on the night his divorce became final. His face, once hard and unreadable, had softened lately, not from peace, but from loneliness. At home, the only one who ever listened anymore was a German Shepherd named Ranger. In the back seat, Ranger sat upright, ears pricked, golden brown eyes locked on the road ahead, as if he understood exactly where they were going. He was the picture of a service K9, strong hindquarters, noble profile, tan and black coat shining even in the dim light. Years ago, he had saved Logan's life by pulling him from a collapsing building after an explosion. He'd earned his silver K9 medal that day, and Logan's eternal loyalty. But Ranger wasn't just a dog. He was what remained of a team that used to be three. Logan, Ranger, and Toby. Toby had been Ranger's brother-in-arms, a slightly smaller German Shepherd, quicker, clever, with a mischievous glint in his eyes. He used to steal water bottles from the supply crates and hide them like trophies. Logan could still picture those eyes, full of mischief one second, laser-focused the next. But now, Toby was gone. When the divorce finalized, the judge had treated the dogs as property. Ranger went with Logan. Toby stayed with his ex-wife, Brittany. It had been 2 years since that decision, and Logan had respected the boundary, sending food, medical care, the occasional message. Brittany's replies had always been brief: he's fine. He's adjusting. We're moving. Things are hectic. But the last picture she sent haunted him. Toby had looked thinner. His coat dull. And his eyes, those bright eyes, had gone dim. That photograph was the reason Logan had returned. He turned down Crescent Drive, a quiet street lined with picture-perfect houses, trimmed lawns, porch swings, flags swaying gently. Brittany's place stood near the end, 2 stories, pale blue with white trim, neat as a magazine spread. It looked peaceful. But Logan's got twisted. Brittany Lell had once been a wildfire in a summer dress, auburn hair, slender frame, laughter that carried across fields. She used to cook with too much garlic and never cared. But after the 3rd relocation while Logan was deployed, something inside her changed. The loneliness hardened her. Her warmth turned sharp. When they divorced, she had refused to keep Ranger, saying the dog reminded her of sand and sirens. But she had insisted on taking Toby. Now, standing at her gate with Toby's old blue collar in his hand, Logan rang the bell. The door opened almost instantly. Brittany appeared, white cardigan, jeans, hair tied back. She looked tired but sharp, eyes bright and wary. "Logan," she said, lips tightening into a polite smile. "Hey," he answered softly. "I was in town. Thought I'd stop by and see Toby." A pause. Then, coolly, "He's not here." Logan frowned. "Not here?" "He's at a seasonal training retreat, behavior camp. Started last week. In October. The trainer prefers fall routines. Easier for structure," she said quickly, arms crossing. Logan nodded slowly, but suspicion flickered in his eyes. "I just wanted to drop off his old collar," he said, holding it up. "He might recognize the smell. You can leave it on the porch." Then, from inside, "Everything good, babe?" Logan froze. The voice belonged to Wes Dalton, Brittany's new husband, tall, athletic, clean-cut, always smiling like a man on camera. He'd been a high school coach, now ran a home security business. His handshake used to hurt on purpose. "Hey, Hartley," Wes said, appearing behind her with an empty grin. Logan gave a small nod but said nothing. He glanced past them into the spotless house, too quiet. Too staged. Then something caught his eye. A flicker of movement by the fence. Low. Slow. Before he could speak, a voice called from next door. "You're Logan, aren't you?" He turned. Mrs. Garner stood behind the picket fence, a small woman in her 70s with thin white hair pinned in a clip and eyes that could still cut through lies. "I thought I recognized your truck," she said softly. "That's the one you used to drive both dogs in." "Toby?" Logan asked. She nodded slowly, voice barely a whisper. "He's not at any retreat." The world seemed to pause. "Where is he?" She looked toward the back of Brittany's yard. "He's still here." Logan's chest went cold. "Are you sure?" Mrs. Garner didn't flinch. "Every night," she said quietly. "I hear him." The wind stirred the chimes on her porch. She turned away. "You didn't hear that from me." Logan's heart pounded as his gaze followed the line of the yard, to the old barn half hidden beneath the trees. Ivy crawled up its frame, a forgotten shell at the edge of a perfect lawn. Beside the truck, Ranger stood stiff, ears up, muscles tense. He whined low, nose lifting toward the barn. Logan didn't need words. He knew that look, he'd seen it in combat dogs sensing a wounded comrade nearby. Something was wrong. He was going to find out, even if he had to break the lock himself. The backyard behind Brittany's house sloped gently downward, ending where the trees swallowed the sunlight. At the far end, half hidden under the shadows, stood the old barn. Once, it might have been used for garden tools or winter wood, but now it looked forgotten, ivy choking its walls, the door sagging on rusted hinges. One shutter hung by a single nail, creaking softly every time the wind shifted. Logan stood just beyond the gate, the late afternoon sun filtering through amber leaves, spilling shadows across his boots. He didn't move. Ranger stood beside him, body tense, tail stiff, a low whine trembling in his throat. It wasn't imagination. It was instinct, the kind no training could teach. Logan's hand found the latch. The gate groaned in protest as he pushed it open, the hinges squealing like they hadn't been moved in years. He didn't rush, didn't crouch, just moved slow, deliberate, the way a soldier does when he knows something fragile is waiting. His boots crunched over gravel until he reached the barn door. It was sealed shut with an old iron latch, rusted, jagged, and cold to the touch. The wood around it had splintered where the weather had eaten through the paint. Then, he heard it. A faint dragging sound, claws against concrete. A low whimper. Then silence. Then another, a tiny, broken yelp, followed by the scrape of movement. Not raccoons. Not wind. Something alive. Logan froze, breath tight in his chest. He pressed one hand to the wall, leaning close. "Toby," he whispered. A pause. Then, a faint shuffle, like a memory stirring. Ranger suddenly barked, sharp and deep, a single note that sliced through the quiet like a flare through fog. Then he whined again, pawing at the barn door. Logan's pulse quickened. He pulled out the multi-tool from his belt and began working the latch. The metal screeched as it gave way. The door creaked open, and a wave of air rushed out, thick with mold, urine, and rot. It hit him hard enough to make him stagger. The light that spilled inside revealed shadows that moved. Then he saw him. Toby. Curled in the far corner between two bales of decaying hay. His once glorious coat, dull, patchy, caked with filth. Ribs showing. Fur missing in spots. A paw twitching weakly as if trying to hide under the feed sack crumpled beside him. His eyes, one bloodshot, the other barely open, locked on Logan for the briefest moment. A whimper escaped, then he turned his face to the wall. Logan's voice broke as he whispered, "Toby." He crossed the distance in 2 strides, fell to his knees beside the trembling dog. Ranger barked again, not in alarm, but in recognition, his front paws pressing forward, tail low but moving. Toby lifted his head slightly. Recognition flickered, faint, unsure, like a dream half remembered. His tail moved once. Just once. Logan reached out a trembling hand. "It's me, buddy." Toby didn't recoil, but he didn't move either. Logan slid one arm under the dog's chest. He was shockingly light, just skin and bones. Up close, the smell hit harder, infection, neglect, despair. Gently, Logan gathered Toby into his arms. The dog let out a gasp, not pain, but disbelief. His body shook like a leaf, heat radiating from fever. Logan turned toward the door where Ranger stood waiting, eyes fixed on Toby like a soldier recognizing a fallen friend. They didn't make it far before a voice cut through the air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Logan turned. Brittany stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, fury burning behind her eyes. Her cardigan flapped in the wind, and behind her, Wes appeared from the garage, a rake in his hand like a weapon. "You broke into my barn," Brittany shouted. Logan's voice was calm but cold. "It's not a barn, Brittany. It's a cell. He's sick." "That's not your dog anymore," she snapped, stepping forward, her voice trembling with anger. "I gave him up," Logan said, his voice steady, "because you promised you'd care for him." Wes's tone turned sharp, menacing. "You need to put him down and leave, Hartley. Now." Ranger moved instantly, stepping between Logan and the couple, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. "He needs medical attention," Logan said, steel in his voice. "He's injured, dehydrated, this is animal cruelty." Brittany's face went pale. "I'll call the sheriff." "Please do," Logan replied. "And while you're at it, I'll call animal control, the local vet, and every K-9 unit in this state." Wes took a threatening step forward. "This is trespassing." Logan shifted his stance, Toby still trembling in his arms. "Call whoever you want. I've got pictures. Videos. And if this dog dies because of what you did, I'll bury you both in court." Brittany opened her mouth, ready to scream, but then her eyes caught the truth. She saw Toby. Saw the sores, the ribs, the dried blood on his hind legs. Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe. Or fear. But it was too late. A car pulled up across the street. A brown leather jacket stepped out, Dale Fairbanks, the town's animal control officer and part-time reporter for the Sierra Brook Gazette. A man who had known Logan since the Marines. He looked from Logan to the barn, his face hardening. "What in God's name?" "Dale," Logan said, his voice low but sure. "You're going to want to take a statement." Wes muttered a curse and stormed back toward the house. Brittany followed, slamming the door behind her. Dale shook his head. Get him to the vet. I'll document everything. Photos, report, I'll handle the rest. Logan nodded, relief flooding him as he carried Toby toward the truck. Ranger stepped aside as Logan laid Toby gently in the back seat. The older shepherd leaned down and licked Toby's face once, soft, familiar. Toby exhaled, a sound like memory returning. He didn't wag. He didn't bark. He just looked. And in that look, Logan saw the same silent promise that had kept him alive once before. We don't leave our own behind. As the truck pulled away from the house, the sun dipped behind the trees. The shadows grew long across the road. In the rearview mirror, Ranger sat guard beside Toby, watching him, refusing to blink. You're safe now, Logan whispered. And for the first time in years, he meant it. The Sierra Brook Veterinary Hospital sat at the edge of town, a squat, one-story building with a faded white exterior and a red tin roof that had seen one too many winters. The hand-painted sign above the door read, "Caring for those who can't speak." And today, those words had never felt truer. Logan parked the truck out front, gravel crunching under the tires. The wind had picked up again, swirling dry leaves in small spirals across the lot. In the back seat, Toby lay curled beneath an old emergency blanket, head resting weakly on his paws. He hadn't made a sound the entire ride. His eyes stayed half open, caught somewhere between exhaustion and fear, like a system too broken to shut down. Every few minutes, his body trembled involuntarily. Beside him sat Ranger, still and watchful. His ears twitched at every sound, his gaze locked on Toby's face as if guarding him from the world itself. Logan took a slow breath, opened the door, and stepped out. When he lifted Toby into his arms again, the dog whimpered faintly, a sound of confusion more than pain. He was frighteningly light, like carrying only the memory of who he'd once been. Ranger followed close, never once breaking eye contact with his fallen brother. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and pine cleaner. A small bell chimed above the door as Logan entered. Behind the front desk sat a woman in her early 50s with short steel-gray hair and square glasses. Her face had the kind of lines that come from decades of smiling at strangers. Her name tag read, Mara, office manager. The moment she saw Toby, the warmth vanished from her eyes. "Oh my lord," she whispered, standing up. "What happened to him?" "He was locked in a barn," Logan said, his voice low but steady. "I need him seen immediately. I've got pictures, videos, everything." Mara didn't waste time. She picked up the phone, pressed a button, and spoke firmly. "Dr. Kim, we've got an emergency." Moments later, Dr. Anita Kim appeared, a small Korean-American woman in her early 40s, hair pulled into a tight ponytail, lab coat crisp but wrinkled at the cuffs. Her movements were efficient, her eyes sharp, her energy calm but urgent, the kind of presence that said she'd seen suffering before, and wasn't afraid to face it. "Bring him this way," she said, opening the door to exam room 2. "What's his name?" "Toby," Logan replied quietly. "He's mine, or he used to be." Dr. Kim didn't ask for details. She simply nodded. "Set him on the table." Logan obeyed, lowering Toby gently onto the padded surface. Dr. Kim's stethoscope touched fur and bone. She listened. Then moved to check the gums, the paws, the abdomen, her expression growing graver by the second. Ranger paced near the wall, head low, whining softly every few moments, unable to sit still but refusing to leave. "This dog's been neglected for weeks," Dr. Kim muttered, voice tightening. "Severe dehydration, infection, pressure sores, and muscle atrophy. He's down at least 20 pounds. Hind legs swollen, maybe a fracture." Logan clenched his jaw. "Can I record this?" She nodded. "You should." He pulled out his phone and began filming, every movement, every wound, every bruise. The light caught on Toby's raw skin, the crusted sores on his hindquarters, the patches of missing fur. Dr. Kim narrated in a calm, professional tone. Based on coat condition, dehydration levels, and presence of untreated lesions, confinement appears to have lasted no less than 3 weeks in unsanitary conditions. Mara returned with a clipboard, her expression tight. She handed Logan a pen. "You'll want to list yourself as the emergency contact," she said. "Given what I'm seeing, I doubt the current registered owner will step forward." Logan nodded. He signed his name with a firm stroke, Logan Hartley. As he finished, a gentle pressure brushed against his leg. Ranger had come to sit beside him, pressing his head against Logan's thigh. Then he turned, nudging Toby's flank gently with his nose. Toby flinched, then hesitated, then reached forward with one paw, lightly touching Ranger's shoulder. It wasn't play. It wasn't even comfort. It was recognition, faint but real. For the first time since the barn, Toby's tail moved. Just once. After the exam, Logan stepped outside to call Lydia Monroe, his old attorney. Lydia had been with him through the divorce, early 40s, dark curls, voice smooth as whiskey but sharp enough to cut through lies. She didn't waste words, and she didn't lose. She picked up on the second ring. "Logan? I've got something you need to see," he said. "I just sent you videos, photos, and I'll have the vet's report soon. Brittany's been neglecting Toby, locked him in a barn. He's barely alive." There was a pause, then Lydia's voice came, colder now. "Is he alive?" "Barely." "Then we have a case." Logan sighed. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I just want to protect him." "And that's exactly what we'll do," she replied. After the call, Logan sat outside on the clinic porch, the evening wind curling dust around his boots. Across the street, the sky had turned gray-blue, heavy, hinting at autumn rain. He couldn't stop replaying the look on Brittany's face, that frozen disbelief. Not fear of the law, but disbelief that anyone would care enough to look. Inside, Toby was resting in recovery. Ranger refused to leave his side, lying quietly on the clinic floor near the crate. Mara came over and handed Logan a cup of black coffee. She sat beside him. "I saw a lot of cruelty growing up," she said. "My dad ran the county shelter out in Beaver Ridge. Back then, no laws, no cameras, no help. We did what we could, but it was never enough." Logan didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon. Mara studied him for a moment. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" He looked down at his hand, the same hand that had held Toby's leash years ago, the same one that had let it go too soon. "No," he said quietly. "I'll fight this whole damn town if I have to." The morning sun rose over Sierra Brook, casting long golden shadows across the neat hedges and glistening lawns of Crescent Drive. It was a Saturday, and the neighborhood was busy preparing for what looked, on the surface, like a perfect day. Colorful balloons danced in the wind. Streamers curled from porch beams. A white table stretched across Brittany Lell's backyard, draped in lavender-striped napkins and plastic confetti. Laughter floated in the air, the kind of laughter that hides the cracks underneath. To everyone else, it was just another birthday party. But for Logan Hartley, parked quietly across the street, it was something else entirely. He sat behind the wheel of his truck, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes locked on the house across the road. His jaw was tight, his pulse calm but heavy. He wasn't here to cause chaos. He was here for truth. In the back seat, Ranger lay watching through the window, alert but still. His ears flicked at every unfamiliar sound. Toby was safe at the clinic, still under observation, but stable now. Before leaving, Logan had sat beside his crate for nearly an hour, whispering the same words again and again. "You're going home." Now, it was time to make sure that promise meant something. He glanced at his phone, 11:03 a.m. If Lydia had done her job, and she always did, the inspection team would arrive any minute. On the seat beside him was a small envelope containing photographs, veterinary reports, and a flash drive, the full documentation of Toby's suffering. Inside the drive was something else, a short clip from the previous night, Toby flinching under dim light, whimpering when someone raised a hand near him. Dr. Kim had insisted it be included. "Pain leaves patterns," she'd said. "And the court needs to see them." Next to the envelope was another piece of evidence, a manila folder that Mara had prepared, filled with photos of bruising, open sores, and the mark where Toby's collar had cut into raw skin. All that remained was proof of who had done it. Logan stepped out of the truck, boots crunching softly against the curb, and walked not toward Brittany's house, but to the one next door. Mrs. Garner was outside, watering a small herb garden that lined her porch. She wore a wide sun hat and a wool cardigan, her frame frail but her movements precise. When she saw Logan, she nodded knowingly. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded once. "If you're still willing." She turned off the hose. "He cried every night," she said softly, "even when it rained." She led him inside to a sunroom filled with old books, porcelain cups, and a small computer humming on a desk. The monitor flickered with a grainy feed, an old security system her late husband had installed years ago. Mrs. Garner's fingers, still steady despite age, navigated the folders until she found the right one. The file was dated 2 weeks earlier. The screen showed Brittany's backyard, faint outlines of the garden, the fence, the barn hidden beneath a tarp. The image wavered like an old VHS tape. Then, movement. A tall figure, Wes Dalton, appeared, ducking through the barn doorway. In his hand, a wooden dowel, thick and uneven. The sound came next. A short, hard thwack. Then a yelp, sharp, sudden, followed by silence. When Wes stepped out again, he wiped his hand on his jeans and tossed the stick toward the trash pile. Mrs. Garner turned away. "I didn't want to believe it," she said quietly. Logan copied the file onto his drive, nodded his thanks, and stepped back into the sunlight. By the time he reached his truck again, the birthday party was in full swing. Children chased Bubbles across the grass, shouting in delight. A bounce house swayed near the patio, pink, white, and impossibly cheerful. At the grill, Wes stood flipping burgers, sunglasses gleaming, laughter too loud. Brittany, in a pale yellow sundress, stood near the cake table, glass of champagne in hand, surrounded by smiling friends. To any stranger, it was a picture-perfect scene. But Logan saw what they couldn't, the illusion, stretched thin over guilt. Then he spotted movement down the street. 2 unmarked vehicles turned the corner, followed by a white van with the city seal on its door. They stopped in front of the house. From the first car stepped Lydia Monroe, dressed in a dark blazer and heels that clicked sharply against the pavement. She was followed by a tall, lean woman in khaki uniform, Officer Brenna Lang, Sierra Brooks' newly appointed animal cruelty investigator. Logan felt his chest tighten with relief. Lydia didn't waste time. She strode straight up the driveway, folder in hand, Officer Lang by her side. Brittany noticed them mid-laughter. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me, what's going on?" she asked, setting the lighter she'd been holding beside the birthday cake. "Ma'am," Officer Lang said calmly, flashing her badge. "We're here to inspect your property regarding a formal complaint of animal neglect." Wes turned, his face hardening. "This is a child's birthday party. You're making a scene." Lydia stepped forward, her voice cool and even. "We're acting on medical and video evidence, Mr. Dalton. May we inspect the rear building?" Brittany bristled. "You have no right." Officer Lang lifted a paper. "We do now. Signed warrant." For a long moment, the party froze. Guests whispered. Children stared. Logan watched from the sidewalk as Lydia and Lang walked toward the barn. The tarp rippled as they peeled it back. The air seemed to thicken. Lang unlatched the barn door and swung it open. Inside, empty straw. A chewed rope collar on the floor. Lang's voice carried across the yard. "He's not here." "Where's the animal?" Brittany stammered. I let him go. He ran away." Logan stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "Funny. He was in there less than 24 hours ago. And I've got videos, vet reports, and witness testimony to prove it." Wes's face twisted. "You son of a..." "Don't," Officer Lang snapped, raising a hand. "Unless you want additional charges." And then, like fate aligning, another vehicle pulled up. The clinic van. Mara stepped out first, clipboard in hand. Behind her, Dr. Kim wheeled out a kennel. Inside, Toby. Cleaned, bandaged, and standing shakily on all fours. His coat was dull but brushed, his eyes clearer now, his gaze alert and aware. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Ranger jumped from Logan's truck, padded over, and pressed his snout against the bars of the kennel. Toby sniffed once, then barked, low and soft. Recognition. Reunion. The crowd murmured, whispers spreading like wind. Lang turned toward Brittany. "Ma'am, do you deny that this dog was under your care?" Brittany's voice cracked. "It was a mistake, he wouldn't behave." Lydia cut her off. "We'll let the court decide what you meant by mistake." A small voice broke through the tension. "Mom, what's happening?" It was Brittany's daughter, standing near the cake table, her party hat slightly crooked. For a moment, Brittany's whole body sagged. The facade cracked. Guests began to drift back, murmuring to each other. Cameras came out. Phones recorded. The perfect life she'd built was unraveling in real time. Logan stepped toward the kennel, knelt down, and opened the latch. Toby stepped out slowly, his movements unsure but determined. His tail moved, not tucked, not wagging wildly, just a calm, grateful sway. He brushed against Logan's leg, leaning into him. Ranger pressed his head against Toby's neck. Together, the three of them turned and walked away, through the crowd, past the cameras, past the whispers. No one tried to stop them. No one dared. The light inside Logan's cabin shifted from gold to blue as the day gave way to dusk. Outside, the wind stirred through the pine trees, whispering against the roof like an old song carried by ghosts. The cabin sat at the foot of the ridge, small, modest, surrounded by wilderness. Smoke curled lazily from the stone chimney. It was the kind of place meant for silence, not recovery. But tonight, it would be both. Logan eased open the door and stepped inside, one arm wrapped around Toby's frail body. The dog trembled with each breath, his weight barely there. Ranger trotted in first, claws clicking softly against the wooden floor. As soon as they crossed the threshold, Toby whimpered. His ears folded back, his body curling tighter against Logan's chest. "You're home, bud," Logan whispered, voice steady but soft. "You're safe now." The cabin smelled of wood and coffee and something warm, a kind of peace that had been missing for a long time. The walls were lined with old books and a few framed photos, Logan in uniform, Ranger beside him, their faces younger, their eyes fiercer. The furniture was worn but clean, scuffed leather, solid oak, a fireplace built of heavy stone. Down the hallway were two small bedrooms. Ranger paused halfway, looking back as if to ask, which one's his? Logan carried Toby into the smaller room, the one that had been filled with old boxes and gear until that afternoon. Now it looked different. He'd cleared the space, laid down a soft fleece rug, and set up Ranger's old memory foam bed in the corner. A bowl of water waited beside a folded blanket, and the blinds were half closed to dim the evening light. Logan lowered Toby gently onto the bed. For a long time, the dog didn't move. His ribs rose and fell in shallow rhythm. His eyes wandered around the room, unsure, scanning corners like a prisoner trying to understand freedom. Logan sat on the floor nearby, not touching, just there. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. No more chains. No more dark. You're home. After a few minutes, he reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a small plush eagle, an old chew toy that had belonged to Ranger years ago. He slid it gently toward Toby. The shepherd didn't play, didn't bark, but after a while, he rested his chin on it. Logan smiled faintly. Good boy. He rose, knees creaking, and said softly, Ranger's got first watch. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Logan dozed on the couch but woke at every sound, every creak of the cabin frame, every gust of wind brushing the windows. Sometime after midnight, he got up and walked quietly toward Toby's room. The door was cracked open. Inside, the moonlight slanted across the floor. Ranger was already there, lying close beside Toby. Their bodies barely touched, but they shared warmth, the kind of quiet connection that didn't need words. Toby's tail flicked once in his sleep. Ranger opened one eye, saw Logan, then closed it again, content. It was the first time Toby had slept without trembling. By morning, the air smelled of rain and pine. Logan made breakfast, scrambled eggs, white rice, and a little boiled chicken, the same meal he used to make for Ranger after rough deployments. He walked to the door of Toby's room and knocked lightly. Breakfast time, buddy, he said softly. Toby stirred under the blanket, eyes wary. When Logan stepped closer with the bowl, Toby's body sank low to the ground, crawling backward until he was halfway under the bed. His nails clicked frantically against the wood. It's okay, Logan said, setting the bowl down on the rug. I'll leave it here. But when he reached out to adjust the blanket, Toby flinched so hard that his head hit the underside of the frame. Logan froze. His hand hovered in the air, helpless. He felt the air leave his chest, slow and painful. Then he backed away, leaving the bowl untouched. He stepped into the hallway, sank down against the wall, and pressed his hands over his face. Ranger padded out a moment later, sat beside him, and leaned his full weight against Logan's shoulder. The shepherd didn't move, didn't bark, just stayed there until Logan could breathe again. Later that afternoon, Logan tried again, differently this time. He didn't go inside. He just sat outside the doorway, back against the wall, and began talking softly. He told stories. About the time Toby had torn through sandbags at a training station because he thought they were hiding treats. About the day both dogs had jumped into the back of a Humvee at the same time and gotten wedged so tightly that the entire unit had to stop and laugh before pulling them out. He didn't know if Toby was listening. But an hour later, when he checked, the food was gone. By nightfall, Toby still hadn't come out from under the bed. But when Logan passed by the room, Toby no longer retreated. That was progress. Logan stayed up late again that night, writing quietly in his journal while Ranger dozed by the fireplace. The cabin lights were low. The only sound was the soft hum of the wind through the trees. Then, sometime past midnight, it came. A sound. A faint whimper from down the hallway. Then another, low, broken, muffled. Logan froze. The sounds grew, stuttering breaths, tiny gasps. Then a single sharp yelp, not loud, not wild, but controlled, as if trapped deep inside. It wasn't crying. It was remembering. Logan recognized it instantly. It was the sound of trauma, the kind you can't explain, only feel. He picked up his phone and quietly hit record. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just let the microphone capture every heartbeat of pain. The next morning, he sent the audio file to Lydia with a short message. PTSD in dogs is real. Can we use this? He didn't have to wait long. By noon, Lydia called back. Her voice carried the edge of someone who just found a weapon. That sound, she said. That's evidence, long-term neglect, stress, repression. Our vet expert will confirm it in court. Keep documenting everything. In the days that followed, Toby began to change, inch by inch. Ranger became his silent guide, leading him to the water bowl, showing him the dog door that opened into the fenced yard. They lay together in patches of sunlight, quiet, breathing the same rhythm. Logan watched them from the porch one afternoon, Ranger licking Toby's ear, Toby barely moving but not pulling away. It was like Ranger had given himself a mission, to bring his brother back from whatever shadow still held him. And Logan, sitting nearby, knew that mission wasn't just Toby's. It was his own. The Sierra Brook courthouse didn't look like much. It sat quietly between the town library and an abandoned post office, a two-story brick building that had seen better decades. Its faded windows caught the morning light just enough to glint, like old eyes refusing to shut. Inside, the air smelled of paper and polish and something heavier, tension. Today, the courtroom wasn't just filled with people. It was filled with history. With accusation. With the quiet ache of truth trying to surface. Logan Hartley sat at the left bench, posture straight but calm. He wore a dark green button-down, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, and boots that still carried faint scuffs from Ranger's paws. He didn't look like a soldier today. He looked like a man who cared. At his feet sat Ranger, still as a statue, eyes forward. Beside him, half tucked beneath the bench, lay Toby, alert, cautious, but different now. His coat was fuller, his eyes clearer. He wasn't whole yet, but he was no longer broken. When Logan had opened the truck that morning, Toby had jumped in on his own. That, to Logan, was victory enough. Across the aisle sat Brittany Lell. Her hair was pinned tight, her black blazer crisp, her pearl earrings gleaming like armor. Her face, though carefully composed, couldn't hide the tension in her jaw or the restless twitch of her fingers. Beside her sat Wes Dalton, chin raised, body stiff, his expression pulled into that same manufactured confidence he wore for neighbors and ads, but his eyes kept darting toward the dogs. At the front, Judge Alton Pierce presided, a wiry man in his 60s with thinning silver hair and a kind of mustache that made him look perpetually thoughtful. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen cruelty too many times and grown weary of excuses. He tapped his pen once and spoke. "Let's begin." Lydia Monroe stood first. Cool, composed, dark curls pinned back, her sharp black blazer cutting against the pale oak of the table. Her voice filled the room, calm, steady, but edged with fire. "Your Honor, this is an emergency hearing requesting temporary custody of the animal known as Toby," she began. "We have 3 sworn affidavits, a full veterinary report, and video documentation of neglect. Today, we ask only for one thing, immediate protection for a dog who cannot speak for himself." Judge Pierce nodded slowly. "Understood. Who are your witnesses?" Lydia gestured toward the benches. "Mrs. Evelyn Garner, first." Mrs. Garner rose slowly from her seat, her navy shawl draped over a pale blouse, her hands trembling slightly but her eyes bright with conviction. She took the stand, adjusted the microphone, and cleared her throat. "I've lived next to the Lell house for 12 years, she began. Her voice carried both strength and sorrow. "Most of that time, I stayed out of their business. But this last month, that poor dog cried every night. Scratching, whining, the kind of sound that haunts you. I heard it through the walls." Judge Pierce leaned forward. "Did you ever see the animal?" Mrs. Garner nodded faintly. "Not clearly. Just shadows. But I checked my old security cameras, I still have them from when my husband was alive. 2 weeks ago, I saw Mr. Wes Dalton leaving the shed holding a stick. A moment before, on the recording, you can hear a yelp. Sharp, short, like someone hit something that couldn't fight back." The courtroom fell silent. Logan looked down at Toby, whose ears twitched faintly, sensing the emotion in the air. Ranger let out a low breath, as if releasing something heavy. Next, Dr. Anita Kim stepped forward, her white coat buttoned, her demeanor clinical but compassionate. I personally examined Toby, she said, her voice steady but somber. He arrived severely underweight, dehydrated, and suffering from untreated sores and infections. He also showed signs of psychological trauma, avoidance behavior, fear response to raised hands, and vocal tremors during rest. Judge Pierce asked, could these injuries have occurred accidentally? Dr. Kim shook her head once. No, Your Honor. These are consistent with prolonged neglect and confinement. Have you seen similar cases? Yes, she said quietly. Once, in a dog rescued from a meth lab outside Missoula. The room drew in a collective breath. After her came Eric Sandoval, owner of the local feed and supply store. A big man in his 40s with hands rough from work, he looked uncomfortable in a courthouse, but his voice was firm. I used to deliver feed to the Lell's place, he said. Saw that dog twice in the backyard chewing grass like he hadn't eaten in days. The first time, I thought maybe he was sick. The second time, I dropped off a free bag of grain-free food. Found it in the trash the next morning. Unopened. He paused, glancing toward Logan. That dog wasn't mean. Just hungry. The next witness was a young woman, Natalie Green, mid-20s, red hair chopped short, voice trembling. I used to work for Mrs. Lell as a pet sitter, she said. For about 2 weeks. One evening, I showed up early. Toby was outside near the shed. No leash, no food, just pacing. When I called him, he came to the fence, shaking, quiet. I told her he needed to be inside. She said he was too rough, that he'd earned the shed. 2 days later, she fired me. She pulled a photo from her bag and handed it to Lydia. It showed Toby behind the fence, ribs visible, muzzle pressed against the wood. Judge Pierce looked at the photo for a long time before setting it down. Logan's chest tightened as he stared at that image. It looked like a ghost of the dog sitting beside him now, the same animal, same eyes, but hollowed out by neglect. He thought of the photo tucked inside his wallet, the one from deployment, with Ranger and Toby sitting proudly beneath a raised flag, tongues out, eyes alive. He'd written on the back, one team. Now, one of them was fighting just to be seen. Judge Pierce leaned back in his chair, sighing quietly before speaking. I've heard enough. He looked down at the paperwork, then back up. I am granting temporary custody of the animal known as Toby to Mr. Logan Hartley, effective immediately, he said. Further hearings will determine permanent guardianship pending psychological evaluation and continued recovery. Lydia exhaled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Logan felt something loosen in his chest, the smallest release after months of tightness. He stood, and as he turned, Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. Outside, sunlight had finally broken through the gray clouds, spilling warmth across the courthouse steps. Logan looked down at Ranger and whispered, "Let's go bring your brother home." The flags outside the Sierra County Courthouse flapped stiffly in the cool October wind. Above, the sky hung low and gray, the kind that makes everything feel suspended, like the world itself was holding its breath. Inside, Courtroom 3B buzzed with quiet tension. It wasn't large, but it felt crowded, not just with people, but with the invisible weight of what had brought them there. This was more than a custody case now. It was the reckoning. Logan Hartley sat on the left side of the courtroom. He wore a charcoal gray shirt, jeans clean but well-worn, boots polished enough to pass for respect but still bearing the creases of working beside dogs. Between his feet sat Ranger, calm and composed, eyes focused on the front of the room. Beside him, resting partly under the bench, lay Toby, healthier now, still lean, but alert. His coat had begun to shine again. His eyes no longer darted at sudden movements. It had taken weeks, but healing had finally begun. When Logan had opened the truck door that morning, Toby hadn't waited for a command. He had leapt in, tail wagging once. That single motion had nearly undone Logan. Across from them sat Brittany Lell and Wes Dalton. Brittany looked polished, black blazer, hair tied into a perfect bun, pearl earrings glinting under the fluorescent lights. But her hands betrayed her, fingers tightening and loosening on her lap like she was holding something she couldn't keep. Wes sat beside her, jaw tight, body stiff, eyes fixed straight ahead. The confident charm was gone. All that remained was the ghost of a smile he couldn't maintain. At the bench, Judge Alton Pierce presided again, same weary eyes, same quiet authority. Only this time, his voice carried more gravity. "We are convened," he began, "to determine permanent custody of the animal known as Toby, and to address the charges of cruelty and neglect against Brittany Lell and Wesley Dalton." He set his glasses down, folded his hands, and nodded for the proceedings to begin. Lydia Monroe rose, steady as ever. Her voice filled the room, not loud, but powerful. "Your Honor," she began, "we've provided time-stamped photographs, 3 separate veterinary evaluations, audio evidence documenting stress-induced PTSD, and 5 sworn witness statements, all pointing to prolonged neglect and abuse." Judge Pierce nodded. "Proceed." Lydia handed a folder to the clerk, and a moment later, the first image appeared on the courtroom monitor. It was Toby, the version no one wanted to remember. Curled in straw, ribs showing, muzzle pressed against a wooden wall, eyes dulled almost to gray. A hush fell over the room. Among the observers were a handful of local reporters, several townspeople, and a small group of high school students seated quietly in the back, part of a civics class brought to witness justice in action. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lydia turned toward the defense table. "Mrs. Lell," she said, her tone even, "do you deny that Toby was in your possession during this time?" Brittany lifted her chin. "I don't deny that he was mine," she said smoothly, "but the story being told here isn't accurate. Logan has every reason to make me look bad. He's my ex-husband." Wes leaned forward. "We told you, that dog was dangerous. He snapped at our toddler. We had to keep him separate. For safety." Lydia nodded once, her face unreadable. "And yet," she said, turning toward the gallery, "Toby is here in a crowded courtroom, unsedated, calm, alert, and has not shown a single sign of aggression." A ripple went through the room. Judge Pierce leaned back, thoughtful. "Continue." "We call Dr. Anita Kim," Lydia said. Dr. Kim approached the stand, lab coat still on, clipboard in hand. She looked neither angry nor emotional, just resolute. "I performed both the physical and behavioral evaluations of Toby," she said. "His weight loss, open sores, and muscle atrophy are consistent with confinement and starvation. The stress-induced alopecia on his tail and his startle reflex to raised hands indicate sustained psychological trauma." She pointed toward the screen. "This level of distress does not occur naturally. It must be caused." Then Lydia queued up the video, the grainy footage from Mrs. Garner's old security camera. The barn. Wes entering with a stick. The sharp thwack. The yelp. The silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Wes's face drained of color. That's not what it looks like," he stammered. Lydia's voice was ice. "Do you need to be reminded, Mr. Dalton, that you're under oath?" He said nothing. Logan sat still, hands folded on his knees. His heart hammered, but his face remained unreadable. Lydia gave him a small nod. It was time. He stood, adjusted his shirt cuffs, and walked to the front of the courtroom. His voice, when he spoke, was low but steady, the kind of voice that carries truth without needing volume. "I never wanted to stand here," he said. "I never wanted a fight. But when I found Toby, he couldn't lift his head. He slept under my bed for 3 days because he was too scared to exist in the open. The same dog who once saved lives on deployment, reduced to that." He looked across the room, not at the judge, but at Brittany. "You told me you'd take care of him," he said softly. "And I believed you." Toby, as if hearing his name, stood up beside Ranger. His tail swayed gently. Then he walked forward, slow and steady, until he stood beside Logan. The room fell silent again. Even Judge Pierce looked moved. Logan reached down, resting a hand on Toby's back. He doesn't know courtrooms. He doesn't know laws. He only knows loyalty. And he never stopped believing I'd come back for him. That's why I'm here. He stepped back to his seat. Judge Pierce removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose before speaking. His tone was softer now, but sure. Based on the evidence presented, the witness statements, medical reports, and corroborating footage, this court finds sufficient proof of long-term neglect and abuse. He looked directly at Brittany and Wes. Permanent custody of Toby is hereby granted to Mr. Logan Hartley, effective immediately. Furthermore, Brittany Lell and Wesley Dalton are prohibited from owning or fostering any animals for a minimum of 3 years. Violation of this order will result in criminal prosecution. Brittany gasped. Wes opened his mouth to argue, but Judge Pierce's gavel came down with a sharp crack. The sound echoed through the chamber like the final note of a long, hard song. It was over. Outside, sunlight had broken free of the clouds. The air smelled clean, that rare kind of air that follows rain and justice alike. Logan stepped down the courthouse steps, Ranger on his left, Toby on his right. Neither pulled ahead. Neither lagged behind. They moved in rhythm, one team again. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. At the truck, he opened the passenger door. Ranger leapt in first. Toby followed, no hesitation this time. He turned once, meeting Logan's eyes. The tail wagged, slow, certain. Logan smiled, hand resting on the doorframe. Let's go home. Autumn arrived early that year in northern Montana. The hills turned gold beneath the endless blue sky, and the air carried that clean chill that meant winter was thinking about waking. A few miles past Corbin's Ridge, on a patch of open land tucked between pine forests and wildflower meadows, sat a small cabin with a green roof and smoke curling from its chimney. That cabin was K9 Haven. Logan had bought the land from a retired park ranger who had one request: keep it wild. Logan kept that promise. He carved the sign himself, bold letters above the porch steps. K9 Haven, no dog left behind. And beneath it, smaller words carved by hand. Ranger and Toby, found, not forgotten. Inside, the walls were lined with photos, Logan with his dogs in uniform, their old medals, the faded photo from their first deployment. Outside, Ranger and Toby ran free across the field, kicking up leaves, their barks echoing through the valley. Ranger, older now, moved slower but still carried himself with pride. Toby's stride was clean, strong, a survivor's stride. That morning, Logan sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching them play. The breeze carried their laughter, or something close to it. "You're spoiled now," he said aloud. Ranger barked once. Toby bounded up the steps, flopping beside him, tail thudding lazily on the wood. Logan reached down and scratched behind their ears. "You've earned it." He looked toward the barn behind the cabin, freshly built, painted red, with new kennels inside. Not cages. Homes. People had started visiting, word spreading slowly about the Marine who rescued war dogs and strays alike. A teenager named Zeke had shown up first, with a limping pit mix named Bella. Then came Mara, the clinic manager, with her rescue shepherd Lenny. Soon, the cabin porch had more than 2 bowls. The trails had more than 2 sets of pawprints. Ranger became the quiet elder, Toby the gentle guide, cautious still, but the first to welcome new arrivals. And Logan, he finally learned to rest. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or angels. Sometimes they arrive on 4 legs, wearing scars instead of wings. Toby wasn't just rescued. He was restored. And through that restoration, Logan found his own redemption, proof that love, loyalty, and grace can rebuild even what the world breaks apart. If you believe that no soul, human or animal, should ever be abandoned, then let this story remind you. Sometimes, the miracle you're waiting for is simply the chance to begin again.